What's up, y'all? Doing a little fireside chat today. I'm gonna read an article that I think we should all be paying attention to. While we enjoy a little bit of log burning. Put another log on there. There we go. Toss that. That's good. There we go. All right. So this is very important. As we talk about inside trading, we've seen so many different financial scandals happen in America. So many go beneath the radar and unchecked. Some actually blow up. We've seen what happened with Enron. We've seen what happened with Bernie Madoff. We've seen what happened with Martha Stewart. But another thing that goes on is what is happening with our members of Congress. There's so much financial malfeasance happening on Capitol Hill that's going unchecked, where congressmen and women are making hands over fists and millions of dollars that they should actually be going to jail and doing time for, and they're only getting slaps on the wrist. Whereas us, the average Joe and average Jane, if we were to do it, we'd be going to jail or paying stiff fines. So I want to read to you an article. This is from the AP, Associated Press. It's entitled, Pressure Mounts on Congress to Curb Lawmaker Stock Trading. All right, so let's go ahead and get into this, right? So, it says, amid a steady drip of damaging headlines, pressure is building for Congress to pass legislation that will curtail lawmakers' ability to speculate on the stock market. Trading in Congress has long been criticized by government watchdogs who say that access to non-public information creates a temptation for lawmakers to prioritize their own finances over the public good. But public anger has mounted since the first tremors of the pandemic, when some lawmakers were caught buying and selling millions of dollars worth of stock after being warned about the coming disruption from the virus. The pandemic's arrival tanked markets and caught many Americans by surprise. Now, with November elections fast approaching and members of both parties embracing reform, congressional leaders are getting on the bandwagon, expressing their willingness to toughen the rules. After a spate of controversies over suspiciously timed trades and undisclosed transactions, few lawmakers are defending the status quo, raising hopes that a significant ethics package is within reach. Quote, this isn't going to solve all of America's problems, but it's a substantive reform that 3/4 of the country supports, end quote, said Senator John Ossoff, who is sponsoring a bill that will require lawmakers and their spouses to sell off stocks or place such assets in a blind trust. The Georgia Democrat beat Republican Senator David Perdue last year in a race that turned largely on Perdue's pandemic-era stock trading. Okay, throw that first page into the fire. Page 2. There's reason for skepticism. Past efforts to tighten ethics rules have fallen short of lawmakers' lofty declarations. And in the end, the task of writing ethics rules governing Congress is left to the lawmakers themselves, creating a conflict of interest that often results in easily evaded restrictions. But progress is apparent. A raft of bills have been introduced, some by lawmakers at opposite ends of the ideological spectrum. Senators are working on a compromise, and House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, whose husband is a prolific trader, is on board with the legislative push, though she has advocated a more targeted approach. Pelosi supports strengthening an existing law, the Stock Act, which requires lawmakers to disclose their stock sales and purchases. She has also called for extending stock trading disclosure requirements to members of the judiciary, while stiffening penalties for members of Congress who flout the rules. Quote, it's complicated, Pelosi said last week. What we're trying to build is consensus. Her stance has evolved since December, when Pelosi reacted to a question about lawmakers' trades by saying there's a free market that members of Congress should be able to participate in. Past ethics reforms demonstrate the challenge ahead. The Stock Act was signed into law in 2012. At the time, lawmakers and government watchdogs predicted that the public discourse would shame lawmakers out of actively buying and selling stock. That hasn't happened. A decade later, trading continues apace, and no one has been prosecuted under the law. The same could be said for reforms enacted in the wake of the Jake Abramoff lobbying scandal. Next page. A 2007 law that was intended to force more disclosure of lobbying activity instead created a new law of shadow lobbyists who work to influence public policy but don't have to register as a lobbyist or disclose their activities. Both those bills certainly did not solve the actual problem themselves, said Craig Holman, a registered lobbyist for the good government group Public Citizen. He said the earlier laws were important, but added that there is room for improvement. Several lawmakers have come under fire for their stock portfolios. Last year, the Associated Press reported that Democratic Representative Tom Malinowski of New Jersey repeatedly failed to disclose trades worth as much as $1 million in medical and tech companies that had a stake in the virus response. He now supports efforts to curtail lawmakers' trading. Former Senators Perdue and Kelly Loeffler, both Georgia Republicans, lost their runoff bids for the Senate last year after their own stock trades became a campaign issue. Both were investigated by the Justice Department and ultimately cleared. Perdue had dumped between $1 million and $5 million worth of stock in a company where he was formerly a board member. After markets crashed, he bought it back and earned a windfall after its price skyrocketed. Loeffler and her husband, the CEO and chairman of the parent company of the New York Stock Exchange, bought and sold millions of dollars in stock following a briefing on the virus. Republican Senator Richard Burr of North Carolina drew perhaps the most scrutiny for his trades. He stepped aside as chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee after the FBI obtained a search warrant to seize a cell phone. Okay. Next page. Burr and his wife sold $1.6 million in early 2020, just before the market began to dive, according to court records. The Justice Department investigated Burr's actions but did not file charges and close the case. The Securities and Exchange Commission continues to probe the matter. Drafting the legislation presents a challenge. Difficult questions remain, such as whether lawmakers who sell their assets would be required to pay capital gains tax, whether the proposed ban would apply to spouses and children, and whether stocks purchased before serving in Congress would be exempt. But supporters of the effort say the rules need to be tight as possible. Quote, I think that the worst possible thing that Democratic leadership could do would be to put forth a bit of a hand-wave effort, said Representative Abigail Spanberger, Democrat of Virginia. That would be so outrageously insulting to the American people. Spanberger is sponsoring a bill with Texas Republican Chip Roy that will require lawmakers to place assets like stock in a blind trust. The issue has broad support from the public. Republicans and Democrats alike point to recent polling, which they say indicate as much as 3/4 of the electorate supports action. Too many Americans have lost faith in Congress as an institution, said Senator Steve Daines. He was a representative of Montana, who is sponsoring a bill with Senator Elizabeth Warren from Massachusetts to ban lawmakers from owning stock. Senator Warren and I disagree on many important issues, but we agree and have found common ground that we have to restore faith in Congress. Okay. Holman, the good government lobbyist, said it's time for Congress to go further than the Stock Act. I agree. It really did reduce stock trading activity by members of Congress by 2/3, Holman said. The problem is there's still 1/3 of members of Congress who are still out there trading stocks. And so this was done by Associated Press writer Matthew Brown in Billings, Montana. So that's interesting, right? We see that they have legislation, the Stock Act, but the Stock Act really doesn't hold any real water. It doesn't have any bite to it. We haven't heard that you can actually punish a person or incarcerate a person, a Congress, let me not say person, a Congress, member of Congress, for basically insider trading. You know, these individuals have access to all this privileged information, and they also have voting power, the power of the yay or nay, the yes or no on a vote, that they know, look, if there's a certain company or a certain sector that's primed to move one way or another, and my vote, yes or no, yay or nay, may result in billions being made or billions being lost based off of my vote, that is problematic. That is conflict of interest, especially if they own stock in these companies. And so this is something that really needs to be addressed. Like I said, you had Martha Stewart, who's an insider trader. She was doing inside trading, and she realized that she was going to take a hit financially if she didn't sell these stocks, because there was going to be a big dip the next day in the market. And they tracked that movement, and they incarcerated. She had to do her time. So when we just said that 2/3 of Congress were engaging in this basically trading of insider knowledge when it comes to rules, laws, legislation, lobbying, and corporations, and what the different moves are going to be that affect markets and sectors within the economy, nobody's doing any time. They're just getting a finger waved at them or a slap on the wrist. There needs to be some bite. There needs to be some punishment, because if it was you or I that found out we were doing some insider trading, you're going to jail. And they should too. All right? So with that being said, there's just a little fireside chat. Do a little different this time. All right. Y'all have a good one.